This lady married her dead boyfriend. In 1978, in a small town in Ohio, there was a woman named Linda Smith who was head over heels in love with her boyfriend. They had talked about marriage endlessly, but just weeks before their wedding, her boyfriend tragically died in a car accident. Linda was devastated. Her boyfriend named Lemmy Leaf was the best boyfriend ever to her. One evening, Linda couldn't take it anymore, and she dug up her boyfriend's grave with the help of her two brothers. She announced she was still going to marry him. The townspeople were baffled, and some thought grief had driven her mad. Linda planned an eerie wedding party and invited everyone, wearing a white dress beside Max's corpse in a suit. Then came the twist. Linda didn't plan on returning her boyfriend to his grave. Instead, she decided that they will live together and have a family. All her friends and family saw her as a mad woman, but she didn't care. She kept her boyfriend inside a refrigerator and would occasionally bring him out for a walk. About 11 months later, she got pregnant, but you already know how she got that child.
Creepy last words people said right before dying. Laura says that she works in a palliative unit, and many dying patients claim to see nuns. The nuns are said to be dressed in all white or all black. She said that many patients' last words before they died were related to the nuns. She said that one time a patient told her, "Will you tell the nun to stop waking me up at night?" She kept waking me up to see if I was okay. On another occasion, she asked a patient who he was talking to, and he replied, "The nun sitting over there." One night, Laura was sitting down, and she noticed someone dressed in all black go into a patient's room. She found it odd for a visitor to come in at 2 a.m., especially since the patient never had visitors before. She decided to peek in the room to see who the visitor was, but when she walked in, there was no one there. The patient passed later that night, even though Laura says that when she put him to bed that night, he didn't seem close to death at all. Laura says that it freaks her out when the patients talk about the nuns.
If you hear bones clinking behind you at night, you better run. The Gashidokaru are a yokai from Japanese folklore dating back 1,000 years. They are described as malevolent skeletal giants that can be as big as 15 times the size of a human. It's said that these giants wander around in the middle of the darkest nights, and if they see a human, they'll sneak up behind them. The last thing the victim will hear is the clinking of bones and the chattering of teeth before the Gashidokaru reaches down with its skeleton hands to crush them and bite off their head to drink their blood. According to the folklore, these things are created when people died from war and famine and didn't receive a proper burial. Unable to move on, their souls become angry ghosts, and when hundreds of them gather together, their hatred ferments and twists into this supernatural force, bringing the bones of the deceased together into this gigantic and horrific form. They're thought to be indestructible, so the only way to ward them off is with a Shinto charm. But what do you think of the Gashidokaru? Make sure to leave a comment and like and follow this channel for more Fortean content.
Imagine going into surgery to try to fix a condition, but you actually come out looking much worse. Well, that's exactly what happened to 29-year-old Kayla Cannon. She was born with congenital ptosis, which is basically a condition where your eyes droop, and she wanted to fix this problem, so she went to a specialist, and then she came out looking like this. Kayla decided to get this procedure done with Dr. Harvey Chip Cole, who's located in Atlanta. This doctor made a ton of mistakes during this procedure, one of them being removing half of her eyelids, which caused a lot of tightness and left her looking like this. After the botched surgery, Kayla had a serious infection and could barely close her eyes because of how tight they were. And she had to undergo 7 additional surgeries to correct the damage, and she was left with these permanent scars. Kayla's devastated because she feels like she went through this procedure only to look worse than what she did, and this is the first time that this doctor did something like this. This is another patient who was also botched, and she came out right after Kayla spoke out about this doctor, and the crazy thing about this is that he is still practicing.
Normal looking photos with disturbing backstories. This might look like a normal family photo, but the reality is terrifying. The man in the yellow sweater is named John, and he's holding a baby named Heather. Heather grew up thinking she was adopted by John's brother, making John her uncle. But one day, a phone call changed everything. She had overheard a phone call saying her uncle was arrested. John Edward Robinson was connected to the deaths of multiple missing women, including 19-year-old Lisa Stassi, who was last seen with her 4-month-old daughter Tiffany, who went missing. And that's when Heather realized she's Tiffany. The man she thought was was her uncle, was actually her mother's killer. John had faked adoption papers and tricked his own brother into adopting his victim's daughter. And for 15 years, no one knew the truth. Follow for more.
Did you know Ronald McDonald is no longer the mascot of McDonald's because of a chilling incident in 2010? This terrifying tale took place in Cuernavaca, Mexico. At a local McDonald's, a statue of Ronald McDonald sat on a bench, a popular spot for photos. Everything seemed normal until one night, when two gas station workers from across the street decided to take a break. One went to the bathroom while the other sat next to Ronald, saying, "I'm tired." To his horror, Ronald replied, "Me too." The man, stunned and terrified, leapt from the bench and suffered a fatal heart attack. Hearing the commotion, the second worker rushed out of the bathroom. He saw something so terrifying that he shared the story with everyone he could. However, days later, he fell into a coma and passed away. McDonald's allegedly erased the security footage from the gas station's cameras and quietly removed most of the Ronald statues. This eerie event might explain Ronald McDonald's near disappearance from the brand.
I'm about to show you one of the most interesting graves in Texas. It's in the Texas State Cemetery in Austin. I visited the other day. It was a cold, dark day. If you walk into the cemetery, you'll notice all the Texas flags and the Texas monuments. These people that were buried here were proud to be Texans. But if you keep walking, you'll notice the Confederate field where Confederate soldiers are buried, and right next to that is the grave of Albert Sidney Johnson. He was at one point considered the strongest general in the Confederacy. He was killed possibly by one of his own troopers. He was killed during the Civil War at the Battle of Shiloh, possibly by one of his own soldiers, and his body was initially buried in New Orleans, but he was moved back to Texas. In 1905, a sculptor was hired to create this monument, and let me tell you, it's eerie because it depicts Albert Sidney Johnson exactly how he looked as he lay dying on the day of his death. It's an eerie monument, it's life-size, it's right in the shadow of Stephen F. Austin's grave at the top of the hill here at the cemetery, and it's very, very, very interesting to see in person.
I don't know if you guys know who these people are, but this is Alana and Brock, and they have a family vlogging channel. They live in Australia, and Alana makes a ton of TikToks about her daughter, Daisy, and how she's sick. Okay. It has just been found that her daughter does not have all of these sicknesses that they previously thought she did, and she was actually being poisoned. Now, Alana had just come on TikTok not too long ago crying and saying how her daughter had brain tumors all through her scans, and her daughter has been sick for a very, very long time. It was found that increased high levels of benzodiazepines were found in Daisy's bloodstream that was leading to her sicknesses. Alana has been profiting off of Daisy's sickness. She has GoFundMe pages, all of her TikToks that are now deleted. The whole page is deleted. All of it has been her doing this to her daughter, allegedly. Daisy's dad said he had no clue about any of this, and the children, because they have multiple kids, were taken out of their care, and right now Daisy is recovering.
So Amy Slayton from TLC's 1,000 Pound Sisters was just arrested, and the way she was arrested is an actual fever dream. Like, honestly, I feel bad because if this goes the wrong way, she could lose custody of her children. So on Labor Day, Amy Slayton, her boyfriend, and 2 children went to a safari park in Alamo, Tennessee. It's basically like a drive-through zoo where you can feed the animals and pet them if they let you. We don't know exactly how it went down yet, but sources are saying that Amy was bit by one of the camels. I don't know if the injury was so bad that Amy called the police or if it's just the park's policy to call the authorities anytime someone is bit by an animal, but the police were called, and when they approached Amy's car, they immediately smelled some green flour, if you know what I mean. And when the authorities looked inside, they allegedly saw the flour and some special mushrooms in plain sight. Amy and her boyfriend Brian Lavorne faced charges of illegal possession of Schedule 1 and Schedule 6. And because the children were in the car, they also faced 2 counts of child endangerment. We know that the children are safe and staying with Amy's family members. But Tennessee's Child Protective Services are still investigating, so this could end very badly for Amy. And as of now, I'm pretty sure Amy is still in the Crockett County Jail on a $10,000 bond. I am unaware if Thousand Pound Sisters is even filming right now, but if you are, let me know in the comments.
If you read the poem I wrote out loud, you might die. Hello, my name is Tamino, the creator of the poem Tamino's Hell. I was a boy who lived in Japan. I had very strict parents who would commonly give me cruel and unfair punishments, and was beat by my sisters. One day, I wrote this poem about my journey through hell, fueled by my sisters. But be careful, do not read it out loud. My parents found this poem and dragged me to the cellar and locked me in for several days. They did not bring me food or water, and I passed away due to starvation. My spirit now haunts this poem, and anyone who reads it out loud will be cursed with the same feelings of helplessness and despair that I once felt, as well as extremely bad luck, including accidents, sudden illness, or loss of their voice, and eventually, loss of life. So don't risk it, and always remember,
Dirty Facts About History That They'll Never Teach You in School, Part 4. In her famous diary, Anne Frank originally wrote many explicit details involving her lady parts, menstruation, and pleasuring herself. Her father, Otto, cut those parts out. John Harvey Kellogg, one of the Kellogg brothers who invented breakfast cereal, advocated for sewing silver wires through boys' foreskins to prevent them from masturbating. In 1969, Yoko Ono released a film entitled Self-Portrait, consisting of a 42-minute shot of her husband John Lennon's semi-erect member. Following its initial screening, the film was never shown again. Often referred to as the father of vegetarianism, Sylvester Graham shunned alcohol, white bread, meat, and lust. He popularized whole grain food products and originally invented the graham cracker in the early 1800s to stop people from masturbating or having sexual desires. In 1851, Graham died of complications from an opium enema at the age of 57.
This man vanished in the 90s, and then, 30 years later, mysteriously showed back up on his family's doorstep with no explanation. This is the bizarre case of Vasile Gorgos. In 1991, Vasile Gorgos, a 63-year-old cattle seller from eastern Romania, disappeared without a trace after leaving for a business trip. Through his work in the cattle business, he would frequently travel to other cities. He bought a train ticket as he usually did and told his wife and kids he'd be back in a few days. He left that day, but never returned. His family reported him missing to the authorities, but after months of searching, they feared the worst. Police theorized he met with foul play, and his relatives knew he wouldn't intentionally run away as he had a family and worked extremely hard for his cattle business. It was ultimately determined that he most likely passed, and his family held a memorial service for him. Fast forward to August 2021, it was a quiet Sunday afternoon when an unknown vehicle stopped in front of the Gorgos home. An older man stepped out as the car quickly sped away, and to everyone's shock, who got out of the car? It was Vasile. His family was in complete shock. He was now 93 years old. He was clean and wearing the same clothes he wore 30 years prior when he went on that ill-fated trip. Along with his clothing, they also found that train ticket he bought 30 years ago, along with some identification. But he barely recognized his family, and seems to have no memory of where he's been the past 30 years. He seems to remember events before the time he disappeared, but nothing from the 30 years he was missing. And after the media got a hold of this story, people had so many questions. As for the car that dropped him off that day and sped away, neighbors said they weren't able to get the license plate or see what the driver looked like. This is one of the strangest stories I've ever heard, and many like myself wonder what happened and who dropped him off that day. Some have pointed to him possibly having another family. Others have speculated a glitch in the universe or time travel. Personally, I am stumped. What are your theories? Where was he those 30 years?
If you're out and about and see a duplicate of yourself standing in front of you, and I'm sorry my friend, but the end is near. Well, at least according to Irish folklore. You see, today we're looking at an entity called the Fetch. Now, the Fetch is a very simple concept. It's an exact duplicate of you, though its appearance is regarded as an omen, usually indicating that your time is near, my friend. Though according to some, the time of day a Fetch appears completely changes what it's meant to be indicating. And so if you see a Fetch in the morning, according to some, it's actually a good sign indicating a long life. This folklore series is quite fun, isn't it? Are you ready for the next episode?
I'm going to warn everybody right now, the case that we're about to cover is easily one of the most disturbing true crime stories I've ever heard in my life, so viewer discretion is really advised for this one. This is Kevin Davis. He was 18 years old back in 2014 when this horrific event took place. Kevin lived here in Corpus Christi, Texas, and shared an apartment with his mother, Kimberly, and his sister, Destiny. On May 26, 2014, Kevin snapped. He had been having homicidal thoughts for a long time, but on that particular day, he decided to bring his dreams and his fantasies into reality. On that morning, Kevin told his mother, Kimberly, that he wanted to unalive himself, and she told him that she couldn't stop him if he wanted to. After hearing this unexpected response from his mother, Kevin went into a rage. He grabbed a cord and attempted to strangle his mother on the couch where she was sitting. But his mom, Kimberly, managed to fight him off, and in a panic, Kevin went into the other room and grabbed a hammer. Now, this is where it gets really disturbing, so if you're still here with me and you have a weak stomach, don't keep listening. Kevin then bashed his own mother's skull in with the hammer, hitting her at least 20 times, and he then grabbed a knife from the kitchen and inserted the knife into the head wound. At that point, Kimberly's head was opened up, she had a massive head wound, and her brain was exposed, and Kevin stuck his hand into his own mother's head and played with her brains. He later told detectives that it felt like putty. Now, after his mother was dead, Kevin dragged her corpse into another room and her, which is unbelievably shocking and disgusting. After all this was said and done, he went to a neighbor's house, told them to call 911, told them that he had just murdered someone, and he was arrested without incident. When Kevin ultimately arrived at the police station, he was brutally honest with investigators about his crimes. I listened to the entire interrogation, and I cannot unhear some of the things that he told investigators. It's vile and shocking. But at one point, he smiles at the investigators with a little grin and says, "Yes, I guess I lost my to a corpse." After his trial, he was handed down a sentence of life in prison. He's still alive, he's still in Texas right now, and he even admitted to investigators that if he was given the chance, if he were out on the street again, he would kill again. I'm sorry to have to fill your guys' minds with this stuff, but this is a truly disturbing case that I can't stop thinking about because of how horrific it is, and yeah, I cannot believe that this happened.
This case is considered law enforcement's most baffling case. Jason Jolkowski was born on June 24th of 1981. Jason's parents were Jim and Kelly. Jason was incredibly loved, and he would become a big brother when his little brother, Michael, was born. Jason was more of a quiet kid. He didn't really have like a huge group of friends. He was very mindful about the people he let into his life, so he did have a small group of friends and he was very loyal to them. But Jason was also incredibly intelligent. He had dreams of being a radio DJ, and he did work part-time while he was in college as a DJ, and people said that when he was on radio, he became very peppy and lively. Like, it was a completely different personality. He was very talented at being a DJ. He was currently taking a break from his classes at the community college he was going to in Iowa because his parents simply could not afford it. But he very much planned on going back to school. He had just recently gotten another job that offered tuition reimbursement, and he was very excited to continue his studies so he could become a radio DJ. But on top of wanting to be a radio DJ, he also was very religious and talked about maybe one day becoming a priest. Jason was not the kind of kid that was involved in partying or drugs. He was a very studious and responsible young man. But before he was starting this new job, he was currently working a job at Fazoli's. On June 13th of 2001, Jason was called into work. His boss called him and asked if he would come into work early that day at Fazoli's. Jason agreed to this, but his car was currently in the shop getting work done to it. So he told his boss that he would just walk to work, which would have been about 4 miles away from his home in Omaha, Nebraska. But his boss said, we have another person coming in, I can have them come pick you up and take them to work. So Jason agreed to meet with this person at the high school that both him and his coworker had gone to school at. This would have been about 8 blocks away from his house, or half a mile. They agreed to meet at the school at 11 a.m. and the last known sighting of Jason was about 10:45 in the morning, when their neighbor saw Jason and his younger brother Michael taking the trash cans from the street back to the garage. This would have been about 10:45. Jason is then seen walking toward his high school right after taking these trash cans back from the curb to the house. And sometime in this 10-minute walk, it would have been about 10 minutes to get from his house to the high school, Jason simply vanishes. We'll get into more in part 2. Give me a couple of minutes to film it and get it up. It'll be down in the comments.